Hello, my name is Vint Cerf. I'm Google's chief internet evangelist, and I appreciate the question that's been put before me, which is to make some predictions about the future of the World Wide Web over the next 30 years, which will take us to 2050, which is, holy cow, that's a science fiction, date, and sounds like a time warp to me. First of all, I'm terrible at making predictions. Those of you who know my long term connection with the internet know that when Bob Kahn and I did our original work, we got the scale off by a few orders of magnitude. We thought 32-bit addressing was good enough. Now we know we need 128 bits of address space. But nonetheless, I think there are some trends that are quite important. The first thing to notice is that the internet and the World Wide Web both have shown a remarkable ability to ingest new technologies, new applications, and to adapt to new needs. I mean, anyone who would like to compare the World Wide Web as it looked in December of 1991, largely a textual kind of interface, and then as it rapidly evolved into a graphical user interface and much, much more elaborate kinds of applications. In fact, by way of example, this video is being recorded. It'll be uploaded by way of a World Wide Web application and to become available if anyone wants to use it. So I think it's very important to appreciate how adaptable the architecture of the World Wide Web has been. And as you think about the kinds of applications that have been feasible, over time, they've increased pretty dramatically, partly because the capacity of the network that's underlying the World Wide Web has gone up, in some cases by 6 or even 7 orders of magnitude. I can remember pre-web that the ARPANET backbone was running at a blazing 50 kilobits per second, and today we see some portions of the internet backbone running at 400 gigabits a second. And of course, many of the streaming video applications, the interactive game playing applications, the two-way or multi-way video applications, the collaborative things that are taking place in real time are all partly a function of reduced latency thanks to higher speed, as well as an infrastructure, physical infrastructure, which has increasingly connected various parts of the globe. So that's one thing to be excited about. I think another thing which is worthy of appreciation is the fact that the HTML construct went out of its way to make use of the Unicode encoding so that all the various languages that can be expressed using the Unicode character set could be a portion of the World Wide Web. And so our ability to cater to multiple languages is derived from that particular fact. And as time goes on, I think we're seeing more and more efforts to incorporate languages that otherwise might not be available as the access to the World Wide Web expands over time. That raises another very important point, and that is that, as I speak anyway, only about half the world's population has apparently direct access to the internet and the World Wide Web. And we know that's changing. We know that many people would like that to change, and I'm one of them. But there's a lot of work to be undertaken, and a considerable amount of investment will be required in order to get to the point where 100% of the world's population has access to the internet, whether they want to use it or not. One of the things which is underway, of course, is a satellite-based system. Elon Musk's SpaceX company has the Starlink idea in mind to put satellites in orbit between something like 700 and 1100 kilometers, which means that the latency will be quite low relative to what you typically think of to a synchronous satellite, which is a quarter of a second up and down. The reason that's so interesting, of course, is that some of these satellites will be in polar orbit. That means that it will be very hard to avoid potential connectivity to the internet on every square inch of the globe, including the North and South poles. So if that works out and if the economics are sustainable and everything is affordable for people who want access by that means, that will be yet another very important outcome. Be hard to avoid connectivity. which raises yet another very interesting point, which is the proliferation of programmable devices that have access to the internet, the so-called Internet of Things. Many of those devices will be enabled, web enabled, so that one can either control them through a web-based application or to use the sensor information that those devices have to be integrated and offered up as part of an application that you can reach through the web. Finally, as we look much farther out, I mean, into the 2040, 2050 period, I am persuaded that a variation of the internet called the interplanetary internet will in fact come into being. We know we have prototypes already running between Earth, Mars, and the International Space Station. But this does raise a very interesting problem, and that is the time delay for interaction at interplanetary distances. In fact, interaction is the wrong word. It takes 20 minutes to get from Earth to Mars and another 20 minutes to come back on a radio link that's going at the speed of light. So that's clearly not interactive. That means that to the extent that we actually have astronauts in exploratory positions around the solar system as the decades unfold, we'll have to think a little bit more about what does the web look like in a high latency environment. And of course, you won't be able to do real-time voice interactions or video conferencing. It will look more like messages, the email that have video attachments, for example. There are lots of implications, operational implications too, about a system with high latency and the potential for uncertain round-trip time delivery. So the web is likely to the extent that it serves a role in that high latency environment, it will have to adapt to be usable under those circumstances. Well, I could go on, but I suspect that many of you would prefer that I didn't. On top of which, there's room for lots of other speculation by others who I hope will become part of a body of people trying to peer over the horizon and imagine what the web might look like in 2 decades' time or 3 decades' time. So meanwhile, as I often say in these videos, I hope that we'll see each other on the net.